Okay, everybody, we have reached the bottom of the hour, so let's get going with today's L10 webinar, Microlearning, How Bite-Sized Nuggets Can Supersize Your Results, sponsored by CMR Institute. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm Editorial Director for L10. It's my pleasure to welcome you today and serve as the host of today's webinar. I'm going to start with some housekeeping items here, including, most importantly, how you can submit questions for our speakers. We are planning a 60-minute session. You'll notice your phones are on mute, so if you do have any questions, we would urge you to use the questions module on the control panel there on the right side of your screen. You can just type in the question, hit the submit button, and we'll ask the question at the appropriate time throughout today's webinar, or queue them up for the Q&A toward the end of the hour. But I always urge people to please do submit questions while they're fresh in your mind throughout today's program. Also on that control panel, I wanted to point out the handouts window. There are several items there you might want to wish to download. You can just highlight any of the items and it'll guide you through downloading to your computer. There's a copy of today's presentation slides there in PDF form for one thing. There's also a file called Micro Roadmap Recipe. You want to make sure you download that later in today's program. They're going to show, our speakers are going to show you that recipe, and it'll be nice to have the visual reference next to you to walk you through the process. So certainly feel free to grab that. And then there's also some information on L10 programs, our 6Ds programs, our calendar of events, and the L10 e-learning lounge. So certainly feel free to download any of those you'd like from the handouts window. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be archived for on-demand access. We're going to send you an email about an hour after today's webinar ends with a direct link to that recording. It'll also be available even sooner than that in the L10 on-demand webinar library. So certainly look forward to either place. And speaking of following up, as you leave today's webinar, a follow-up survey is going to pop up on a separate browser window. I would ask you to please take a moment when you leave today's webinar, look for that survey, and briefly share your thoughts with us on today's webinar. We produce these programs for you, so of course your feedback is always important. And along those lines, my email address is showing here at the bottom of the screen, and I'll share it again later in today's program. If I can help you with anything around our webinars, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, with all of that said, let me introduce you to our speakers today. You're going to be hearing from Laura Last, Carrie Garrett, and Chris Webb. Laura is the Global Director of Learning Performance for Amgen. Laura has more than 27 years of experience in healthcare and pharmaceuticals and has held roles as a sales representative, field sales trainer, strategic trainer, district manager, marketer, and marketing trainer. Also key account manager and a field sales management trainer. Laura has a passion for training and improving performance. Carrie Garrett is Director of Learning Strategy for CMR Institute. Carrie has more than a decade of instructional design and e-learning development experience. She has a passion for creating engaging and memorable learning experiences that make a difference. Carrie lives by the rule that learning doesn't have to be and shouldn't be boring. And finally, we have Chris Webb. Chris is Senior Instructional Designer for CMR Institute. With more than a decade of instructional design and e-learning development experience, Chris also has a passion for creating highly interactive learning experiences. Chris believes learning experiences should be relevant, engaging, and most of all, fun for every learner. I know you're going to enjoy learning from Laura, Carrie, and Chris today, so I'm going to turn things over to Carrie to get us started. I'm going to ask you to bear with us for one moment. I'm going to change our screen here, so your screen's going to change briefly as we switch to Carrie as the presenter. Carrie, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Chris, Laura, and I are so excited that you could join us today for this webinar on microlearning, how bite-sized nuggets can supersize results. And if you can't tell already, I do want to warn you, we have a food theme going on, so you may want to grab a snack because it might make you a little hungry. Today we're going to share what microlearning is, what it isn't, why learners are craving it, and how it can benefit your organization. Plus, we have a fun takeaway for you at the end so you can jump into planning your own micro menu. So let's get started. First, we wanted to start by talking about what microlearning really is. There's no doubt that it's a hot topic right now, and you may be hearing people talk about microlearning in different ways and with different definitions. So let's do a quick poll. Given these choices, what do you think microlearning is? Is it A, chunking current content into 10-minute or less segments, B, a way to focus on one learning objective at a time, C, part of an overall learning strategy, or D, a fad that will pass faster than you can say 6 McNugget? So we'll give everybody a minute. Go ahead and put in your choices. All right, votes keep coming in. Just about another minute, 30 seconds or so. All right, looks like most people have voted. So let's go ahead and close the poll and share, see what people say. So it looks like majority of people think it's chunking current content into 10-minute segments, 10-minute or less segments. So in a way, you may be thinking that there could be some truth to each of these options, and you're probably right. However, I hope that by the end of this webinar, you'll see that one of these characteristics rises above the rest.
So let's start with a simplistic definition of microlearning. In general, microlearning is a way to provide specific bite-sized units of content to learners. And perhaps as we continue to further explore what it is and what it isn't, our definition of what microlearning is will evolve. So first off, microlearning is bite-sized. Probably the most recognizable trait of a micro lesson is that it is, well, micro. That is, it's small or it's short. When you give learners short bites of content instead of a 100-slide mega course, lessons feel achievable. In this way, microlearning is easier to take on and easier to get through than, say, a traditional course. And this is why we say consuming small nuggets makes for a happy meal. It's true that a key component to microlearning is its bite-sized nature. However, you probably already knew that. And there's more to microlearning than just being small. Let's take a look at a few more examples of what microlearning is and isn't. So microlearning is not here for a limited time. And for those of you who are fans, it's not the McRib. We believe it's here to stay. It's also not a new concept or passing fad. Today, we may think of microlearning in terms of a post, a pin, a tweet, a snap, a photo, a hashtag, or a link. In the past, you may have heard microlearning called reusable learning objects, mini learning, micro courses, nano learning, short courses, chunk learning, burst, bites, or snacks. But micro isn't exactly new. Think about a 30-second radio advertisement for a new fast food offering, or perhaps a word of the day screensaver, or even flashcards when studying for an upcoming exam. Not exactly modern concepts, right? So that's why we say microlearning today is not an original recipe. It's been around for a while and it's growing in popularity, and for good reason. Microlearning isn't just small content, it's also easily digestible content. A key ingredient of microlearning is that each micro lesson is focused on one and only one learning or performance objective. It's about reducing information overload, getting to the point really fast, and focusing on the need to know information instead of the nice to know. That is to say, we want to cook up learning meals that are not too content heavy for our consumers, but still leave them feeling satisfied with the knowledge or skill that they've gained. While a more traditional e-learning course may incorporate multiple learning objectives, microlearning deals with only one objective per module. This ensures that learners take one step at a time so that they clearly understand it before moving on to the next one. And keep in mind, today's learners are not only used to, but also have an expectation of short, high-impact bursts of information. A Facebook post, a Twitter statistic, an Instagram photo, a LinkedIn article, or a YouTube video. This is what they've become accustomed to. This is why we say in and out learning can still be hearty, because the perception might be that small equals not filling. But consider that a Happy Meal has 539 calories. That's a lot of calories packed into a small kid's meal. In much the same way, micro can offer big learning at a value size. Microlearning is also not yesterday's meatloaf. A common misconception is that microlearning is just taking existing content and chopping it up into smaller, shorter pieces. And while microlearning should be short, it should also be to the point and focused on one learning objective, as we already discussed. Content chunking is actually the easy part of creating microlearning. It's not all that difficult to take a 10-minute course and break it up into 5 2-minute modules. The challenging part is to recreate and present the micro-content in an engaging way that makes sense to the learner, viewed either individually as a standalone module or as part of a broader curriculum. So remember, it's not about the number of slides or the perceived seat time. It's about offering the right amount of information necessary to help a learner achieve one specific, actionable objective. It's why we say it's not fast food, it's good food fast. Microlearning is also an order to go. This is where microlearning shines and perhaps differs from most conventions of what it is. As we've discussed, microlearning isn't just smaller chunks of content that are assigned to learners in a particular order. Rather, microlessons are short, entertaining bursts of learning that viewers can consume how they want. Because they're only focused on one learning objective, microlessons can be easily searched and accessed so learners can find the exact content they're looking for. In addition, microlearning has to accommodate the modern mobile learner when they want to learn, where they want to learn, and on whatever device they want to learn on. That's why we say you don't always eat at the kitchen table. Learning can and often does happen in so many other places than a quiet office on a company-approved laptop. Learners want and expect to be able to learn on the fly when and where they want. Design your microlearning for mobile-enabled learning and to be responsive on any device. Microlearning is also not just one bite-size-fits-all. Microlearning comes in various flavors or rich media formats. A microlearning module will not always be in the form of a traditional e-learning course. They can be independent learning units in just about any form. For instance, a short video, an infographic, a podcast, quiz, scenarios, whiteboard animations, interactive PDFs, case studies, polls, games, and the list goes on. Various formats can help eliminate the monotony in training programs and increase the interest levels of learners. That's why we say, keep your menu fresh with different types of offerings. Learners today are used to viewing information in various rich media formats. The flexibility microlearning offers helps meet learners' expectations to have an engaging learning experience. And finally, microlearning is learning by the slice. Typically, microlearning is just a slice or a portion of an overall learning strategy. Microlearning can certainly be part of a blended learning approach of assigned courses, modules, or classes. However, microlearning can also stand alone, being consumed as a just-in-time snack when users are hungry and in need of some nourishment. As learning professionals charged with ensuring the knowledge and skills of a workforce, we often desire a strict adherence to the learning plan we've established. But we must be more learner-focused. It's about the information or skill a learner needs or wants at any given moment. And who knows best what the learner needs or wants at any given moment, us or them? Just as people have varying taste for what they like on their pizza, every learner brings a different background of knowledge and experience, needs, and wants. That's why we say, let your learners choose their slice. They know their taste better than anyone. Think of a specific training plan as a pizza box. Inside is everything a learner might want or need to consume regarding a particular topic. Now, let them decide how hungry they are and what they actually want to eat. Now let's look at some ways that organizations can use microlearning as part of their overall learning strategy. It is important to note that microlearning is not a replacement for formal training. For instance, it's not likely that your whole onboarding strategy will be in the form of microlearning lessons. But that's not to say that microlearning couldn't be a part or a slice of an onboarding learning plan. Microlearning is often used to complement formal training by making it more interesting and meaningful to the learner so that they can apply it on the job. Let's look at a few examples of how you could use microlearning in your overall learning strategy. First, you could use microlearning as blended elements. That is, mixing them in as assigned content, such as short tutorials that support and build on the main learning content. Think of taking a class in college and then being assigned an article to read or a questionnaire to complete before the next class. It's something that takes what you've already learned and gives you additional information or practice. You can also use microlearning as spaced practice. Spacing out small bites of content that build on one another is not only a quick way to engage learners, it's also a great way to move knowledge into long-term memory. Think about a scenario where a learner has taken a fundamental learning course and learned the main points of a specific topic. With spaced practice, you could provide them with short exercises a few times a week or even every day to allow them to recall information and use it in some tangible way, even if it's just a quick quiz question or two. Check out the language learning app Duolingo for a great example of spaced learning theory in action. Finally, you could also use microlearning as performance or learning support. These could be assigned learning nuggets or unassigned learning nuggets that, while not technically part of a learning plan, can allow quick access to practical advice and how-to videos to assist in carrying out tasks. Think YouTube on this one. You just need to identify what methods work best for your learners and your specific situation and strategy. Laura, I was actually wondering if you could share some insight on how Amgen is using microlearning as part of its overall strategy.
Absolutely. So, hello everyone, and I'd like to just share a little bit about kind of where we came from first and then where we are starting to move in this process. We, like many other organizations, I think, came from the paper modules of the past. In many cases, we were really good at the need to know and the nice to know, which you mentioned earlier, Chris. So, and we had things like, 50 to 80 page modules that our learners would have to read in a home-based environment before they came into their live training. Whether it was in product or disease state, those larger modules really weren't uncommon. And then, of course, we moved, like most people did, more to a static PDF type learning where it was the same modules. We just put them in an electronic format where the learner could either read them on their laptop or on their iPad. Yet still just a lot of information. And we know, obviously, that the learners weren't sitting down and reading those 80 pages. And if they weren't probably remembering a lot of that, again, with having so much information there. So, we read the research just like everyone else does, and we have, obviously, our sales forces have changed in their demographic, and we've got different, again, not only different people, but I think every age group is just getting to the point where we don't want to take a lot of information in at once. Everything moves so quickly, and we look at our phones for 3 seconds, and then we do something else. And so we really tried to go with that concept and really looked into microlearning and how can we do this. And so we almost really looked at this as a challenge for us. We had a new product that was going to be launching that was within a disease state that we'd already been training in. And then we also had a new product that was going to be launching within a new disease state. And so we took this as the opportunity to look at the fact that we didn't want to just take our existing content with our first disease state that we already had and break it into smaller elements. And so that's where we actually started, by looking at what we currently had and breaking down some of the original content. But we also put it into a whole new platform that very much allowed the learner to eat those pieces of the pizza how they wanted to. But we also wanted to get them to think about binging on that pizza, like many people do with binge TV watching. We wanted to do a little bit with binge learning. And so we actually looked at a whole new technology platform, which we implemented. And not only did we break down what we currently had into those single objectives for each one of our microlearnings, but we were able to completely change what we had done. And we aligned it with videos that walked through a patient experience with that disease state. And so those videos were really designed to get the learner engaged and excited, and the videos stopped at certain points where someone would be, very interested in what's going to happen next, just like our binge watching of TV episodes. And so what we found, and what was very interesting in that first piece that we were learning about, is that we had a lot of people from that disease state that had gone through the original training that we did 9 years ago, and then we took them through this new training, as well as individuals new to the organization that took the new type of microlearning and training for their home-based study. And the results and the feedback that we got was phenomenal. And just even as we brought them into classroom training, there was such a major difference in their performance in live training, having had them with the microlearning and the blended elements of training in their home study. So we found it to be incredibly effective. And so we're now doing this with a brand new disease state and a brand new sales force. And we really do more of that blended element type of training, but we've actually looked into several different technologies to be able to do this, where we have the space practice. After we go through home study, we throw out challenges and questions, coaching challenges for the representatives, as well as the entire program is really now called a learning library. So that, again, to your point, Chris, they can go back and kind of select which type of pizza that they want, and go back and learn things that they've already learned, or they can use their iPad or their phone in the field and be able to go and refresh themselves on something before they call on a practitioner. So we've really encompassed this now and are starting to move to all of our disease states being in this type of programming and in this type of microlearning, so that even, the home study looks like that, but we're also really trying to change classroom study as well, so that we don't have hour-long presentations for people anymore sitting in their seats. We've really scaled things down to 10 to 20-minute presentations live, and then utilizing technology or gaming or those types of things, workshopping within the live training as well. So that's a good summary of what we've done so far.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Laura. So in addition to what Laura talked about as great examples, we also have some other examples of microlearning on the screen. As Chris shared, microlearning is not just one size fits all, and it's so cool because it can come in so many different forms. And here you can see just a few examples. We have an infographic that gives key pieces of information in a really visually appealing way. Animations are also a great example, and they're quick and easy to develop. This one on general circulation shows how the heart works and how the blood flows through the heart. And so when learners can really visualize something like this, it makes the learning so much more impactful. Podcasts are another great example of microlearning. They can cover one key learning objective in a quick and efficient way and are easily accessible for learners. They're a great way to maximize windshield time for busy sales professionals. And also, these flip cards are another fun, engaging example of presenting information in an interactive way. And the examples that Laura shared in these few examples, microlearning can also take the form of short videos, interactive PDFs, quizzes, case studies, and the list really goes on, which I think is why we're all sort of gravitating to microlearning. So now let's spend a few minutes talking about our learners and how microlearning really benefits them. First, there is a big appetite for small portions. Smaller lessons are more manageable and appetizing to today's learners who are often overwhelmed, impatient, easily distracted, and have short attention spans. When content is short and entertaining in some way, it really can keep learners' attention, if only for a minute or two. So we've mentioned attention span a few times now. Now, I know that we can all spend hours binge watching Game of Thrones or This Is Us. Humans are still capable of fully concentrating on something that we're into, but rather we've made the choice that we are unwilling to pay attention longer than a few seconds for something that we aren't immediately entertained by, or that we don't instantly see as something that's relevant and can help us in some way. We have a preference for short, concise, relevant content. Think about this when designing for your learners. Second, microlearning should be made to order. Doesn't it feel really great when you get a sandwich that's made exactly to your liking? Not one of those airport pre-made sandwiches that you have to pick the tomato off of or add the mayo to. Something's made just for you based on your appetite, your likes, and your needs. As you design your learning strategy, think about how you can allow your learners to pick and choose lessons that are applicable to them. Empower the learner to guide themselves and learn what they feel they need to learn at that time and at their own pace. This type of strategy respects your learner's time. After all, a busy professional may only have a few minutes to learn, process, and apply new info. Should it be information that they need just in time for when they need it? This is a huge benefit of microlearning that is sometimes downplayed or even neglected. Third, microlearning needs to be accessible. Like the slide says, on a learning journey, no one should ever get hangry. Now, we can talk about accessibility in two ways. The first speaks to the point we just made, giving learners access to content on their own time, not just at work during breaks or at lunch, not just during designated training times, not just in a particular order that someone else has identified. Unlike more formal sit-down learning meals that require an extended amount of time to complete and logging into an LMS, microlearning is all about ease of access, when, where, and how the learner needs to snack, if you will. The other type is device-specific accessibility. We all have access to a lot of different devices. With the responsive design of many e-learning authoring tools like Articulate, Storyline, and Rise, your learning development team can create microlearning that will look great however the learner chooses to engage with the content, whether a phone, tablet, their desktop computer, etc. Okay, so I think it's about time. We've been talking enough. I think it's time for some participant interaction. So we're talking about what learners like about microlearning. I want to put you in the learner's seat. Let's say you get a new job at a new company and you haven't really, in Outlook you can add in your email signature and you haven't do that for, let's say, like 10 years because you've been working at the same company. Switch companies, then you realize you forgot how to do that. So out of these three options, we can start the poll. Which of these would you choose as a learner, and how would you choose to learn to add a signature to your email? Would you prefer to A, take an hour-long classroom training on Microsoft products, including Outlook, B, take a 10-minute overview course in your LMS about Outlook, or C, watch a 2-minute video on YouTube on how to add a signature to your email in Outlook? So we'll give everybody a couple of minutes. Responses are coming in. I think I see how this is going. All right. Give everybody another second or two. All right. Let's see. So a majority of us would say the 2-minute video on how to add a signature to your email in Outlook. And this actually happened to me not too long ago. And I'm like, I don't remember how to do this. And so one option was to go to the YouTube video. But another great option is just type in the internet and find an article on it. Or you could also type in the help in Outlook, as performance support. So I think it's just important for us to really think about our learners and what they need. Microlearning is more about how people learn than how long learning really lasts. We live in an on-demand culture. We want and really expect to get what we want when we want it, whether it's next day shipping with Amazon for that shirt we can't wait 2 days for, or watching the next episode of our favorite binge-worthy show on Netflix. Learning is really no different. Learners don't desire or need to know everything. They simply must know where to find the critical information they need during any given learning moment. Just like me when I needed to find out how to how to add a new signature in Outlook. People don't learn willy-nilly. Learning occurs when motivation to learn is high, like a new job or a big presentation, or you're going to a high-stakes business meeting. When we're not truly motivated, we rarely pay enough attention to learn effectively. This is why microlearning is going to be a key component of learning strategies for successful learning organizations. So we've talked about what microlearning is and what it isn't, and why learners like small portions. Now let's talk a little bit about the benefits for your organization, because we all know that if it doesn't benefit the bottom line in some way, it likely won't fly. Because micro lessons are shorter, your development time may be shorter, and so that can save your company money. I do want you to keep in mind that while development time can definitely be shorter, design can still take a significant amount of time, because to do it right, you'll need to condense learning materials into short, concise learning experiences that can stand on their own. So it's really more than chunking that content into 10-minute segments. It's really looking at the content and saying, can this content stand on its own? Am I only focusing on one objective? And is it going to meet the learner's needs? Another reason organizations are liking microlearning is because microlessons are easier to update. As they're short, it doesn't take long to update micro content. More traditional learning and training methods aren't as conducive to constant changing and updating. Microlessons are also affordable and agile. Organizations don't need to spend a ton on microlearning nuggets. Studies reveal that organizations end up bringing down the development cost by 50% with microlearning at a development speed of positive 300%. Yeah, I said 300%. Now, this isn't the case for all companies. If, let's say, you're transitioning your company training from simple PDFs to engaging video scenarios or interactive components, your development costs will be higher by the nature of this change. And Laura, I think you spoke a little bit about that earlier, but can you share your experience here in terms of development time and cost?
Absolutely. So interestingly, taking our existing content for the first disease state that I was referring to actually took longer and was more expensive than the starting from scratch with the new disease state. And again, to your point, Carrie, that part of that is because we were taking static or even interactive PDFs and moving them into the types of learning that you showed on the screen with animation and the videos and that type of thing, and having a new platform. But once our platform was established and then moving into starting from scratch again, it did end up being less expensive and took us a little bit less time for development than it typically did in the past.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's great to hear, the real world perspective. So another, another reason is that organizations are also looking to microlearning because it allows learners to spend less time at the table, aka their desk. Companies like that their employees will spend less time eating, aka learning, and more time putting the calories they consume to good use by doing. Learners can get what they need and get back on the job. Plus, learners are more likely to apply that learning, which brings me to my next point. It takes longer to burn off fast food. What I mean by that is that the short, engaging, and reinforcing nature of microlessons causes them to stick with the learners longer and be more effective. You can say see you later to that dreadful forgetting curve that I'm sure we've all seen. Microlearning improves employee performance, and when we boil it down, isn't that why we're all here? And Laura, would you say that that has been what you've seen?
Definitely. We have actually, like I mentioned, when we brought the folks in for phase 2, the actual classroom-based training, they were much more prepared than they had been in the past.
Great. I think, talking about the forgetting curve, where it says that people lose 80% of what they take in a training module or an e-module or a training class, and that's just so disheartening as a trainer. So I think microlearning can really help us get past that. So let's do another quick poll. What do you think the maximum duration of a microlesson should be? Should it be A, 90 seconds? Should it be B, 5 minutes? Should it be C, 8 minutes? Or D, 15 minutes? The maximum duration of a microlesson. Give everybody another 30 seconds to put in their answers. Oh, this is a close one. All right. 10 more seconds, everybody. 90 seconds, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, or 15 minutes. All right, so let's see. So it's pretty close. 5 minutes, 8 minutes was the most, then 5 minutes, and then 15 minutes, but no one said 90 seconds. So basically what I'm telling you is there's really no official right or wrong length for microlearning. And I know that we really like that. I know that we like to say, okay, it's 10 minutes or less. But there's really no right or wrong answer. Most experts suggest 2 to 5 minutes as being really optimal, but the amount of time per lesson is sort of irrelevant. It's the content that's really important. I think that's something we really need to keep in mind as we design. If each lesson is under 15 minutes, it can be classed as microlearning from the research that we've done. So the key concept to remember is that you're taking one learning objective and allocating that to a single item of content, i.e. a lesson. If you stick to one learning outcome per microlesson, you should be good to go. So here's some microlearning food for thought. Here are 4 key takeaways. Food for thought number 1, serve one nugget at a time. We call this nuggeticate. Basically, that means stick to one objective and keep a learner's taste buds interested. This is really our key guiding principle. By sticking to one learning objective, you'll ensure that you are serving portions that can be consumed in just a few bites and that the learners are getting what they truly need. Check yourself on this regularly. Challenge others on your team. Are we really focusing on one objective? As humans and trainers, we want our learners to be prepared with all of the knowledge and skills possible so they can succeed. But sometimes we get in our own way by trying to cover too much. So when making design decisions, always come back to this guiding principle. Food for thought number 2, this learning is micro-craveable. Smaller plates actually increase the amount of food consumed. If people are serving themselves, then they will either pile more on their plates or go back for seconds or thirds. Remember the potato chip slogan, bet you can't eat just one? We think you'll find that your learners will have an increased appetite for microlessons. And Laura, I know that you specifically told us that you've had this experience. Would you just mind sharing a little bit more about how your learning became binge-worthy?
Absolutely. So I had mentioned that we incorporated a new platform where we had the patient videos that really, captured people's attention. And again, to your point, as long as that attention is captured and we're being entertained, we continue to crave and want to dig in a little bit more. And that's exactly what happened with our learners. So we did exactly what we've been describing here, where each video and each module was focused on one specific learning objective. And the learner watched the video first and then did the interactive module, which incorporated many of the things that we've spoken about that were micro-learning, and each module throughout the entire overall learning strategy had different types of learning. And so our learners really found that they wanted to keep moving on. And again, the result of that is really that they remembered things and they knew how to apply those things, which I found was even more interesting because they were so fascinated and interested in the subject matter and how it was given. It really did make a big change on their application of the content as well as they came into live training. So it was a great experience for us, and like I said, it's definitely something we're going to be moving into all of our training. But we just found that people came into the live training excited. They were like, I couldn't stop watching these, and I'd go back and watch it again, and I'd go back and take the interactive pieces again. So they were definitely craving the learning much more so than in the past.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's, every trainer's dream right there. All right, food for thought number 3. Don't be surprised because inevitably someone will ask, where's the beef? Because we're all used to doing things how we've always done, and because, change is hard. Not everyone in your organization may be in the mood for smaller portions. So here are our tips for dealing with that. Be prepared to explain why fast food can satisfy learners' appetites and how it is a part of, but not all of, your overall learning strategy. Also, it's a really great idea to ensure that everyone is on the same page with what microlearning is and isn't before embarking on creating your learning strategy. Feel free to take this PowerPoint deck. You can access it through the Handouts tab and educate your training and development team on what microlearning is and what it isn't before tackling your strategy. Bottom line, you can assure people that microlearning is 100% natural. Food for thought number 4, get comfortable with drive-through learning. Remember, micro works best when the learner is in control and can pull the content when they want it. Stop viewing learning as something that only takes place at your restaurant, aka your work, when you say it's okay to eat. Let learners have it their way. Allow them to search for and access the content they need when they need it. This means giving them more control and developing for mobile so learners can access from any device. When you make learning content accessible from mobile devices, research shows that employees access this content voluntarily 42% more frequently. I think that's really exciting. So let's take a minute to talk about how this could work in real life so you can see the value of what we've been talking about today. Short, focused lessons that are easily accessible just in time by your learners when they need it. So imagine that you're the head chef and you need to give Greg, one of your newer team members, some feedback that he really doesn't want to hear. You're lucky because you don't have to have these conversations very often, but you do remember taking a module on coaching and giving feedback a few months ago, but you really wish you had a quick refresher before having this tough conversation. This is an example of something CMR is doing for a client right now. It's called a micro-minute collection. In this case, before we have our conversation with Greg, we would grab our iPad or our phone, go to our leadership micro-minute collection, and look at the coaching section where we have a quick step-by-step walkthrough on how to give effective feedback. You can do this right before your conversation so you feel confident, you're prepared, and you're able to give Greg the feedback he needs in an effective way. And micro-minutes are really exactly what they sound like. They're a curated collection of micro-learning lessons on key industry topics. They're easily accessible, always available collection of bite-sized, just-in-time learning resources that will help learners recall learned information and pull through learning to their everyday life. And I really want to go back to this important point. They're designed to be used as a part of our client's overall learning strategy, not the whole thing. Their learners still have a robust learning plan of engaging e-modules and workshops to give them necessary foundational knowledge. And now they'll have micro-minutes to reinforce that learning and provide a just-in-time refresher. And it doesn't just stop with leadership. Imagine if your learners are going in for a big client meeting and they want a quick refresher on value-based selling or reimbursement or formularies before they head in. Micro-minutes can give them the learning they need, when they need it, and how they want it. So let's take it back to the beginning. If you'll recall, this was our basic definition of microlearning that we talked about earlier. Based on this, I think, and based on our conversation today and our conversations with Laura, I think that we can add some to this. Let's beef it up a little bit, if you will. So how about this? Microlearning is a learning strategy that enables learners to easily digest bite-sized pieces of information in highly engaging and interactive ways, consuming content when and where they want. I think that pretty much sums up everything that we've talked about today. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, how do I know how to determine what's on my company's menu of micro offerings? Now, we can't give away our top secret recipes, but we can share with you this recipe template that you can use. You can find this in the handout section of the tool panel. So this recipe card will walk you through the important questions to ask yourself as you get started with your micro menu. So on one side, you'll see the steps or the questions you should ask yourself, and the back has spaces where you can fill in your answers. Now keep in mind, this is a recipe card for just one item you'll be serving. And for a given meal, you may have 10 more recipes or micro lessons or objectives or behaviors you're serving. Use these cards to outline your micro strategy for a given topic and determine the order in which the meal is ideally served. So what order of the cards, objective steps makes sense? What's an appetizer, what's a main course, and what's a dessert? So Laura, you and I had a conversation about these cards. Can you share your thoughts on how this card might be helpful for an organization just starting out?
Absolutely. Again, I started this well over a year ago, and we didn't have anything like this when we started this journey. So as I was looking at this when we were discussing this webinar, I thought, wow, this would have been a fantastic thing for us to have guided us through this process. And interestingly, it's almost identical to what we kind of came up with when we were going through this process. We really had to sit down and figure out, is this the right strategy? Who's our audience? What is the one thing that we're trying to achieve here, et cetera. So I love this, that Carrie CMR has come up with this and are providing this to people that are looking into microlearning and really how to develop a micro lesson. I sure wish I would have had something like this when we got started. So I encourage the listeners to use this, and you may come up with some of your own questions that you need to answer, but this is a great place to get started.
All right. Thank you, Laura. And we hope everyone else finds this helpful as well. So that's it for really the content portion of the webinar, but we do have some time for questions. I know that's usually most people's favorite part. So we can take some questions, and actually some questions came in while the webinar was going. So I'm just going to start with those. Richard, looks like Richard wants to know how microlearning can be used for onboarding new employees. Well, using microlearning assets can really they can be really effective in your overall onboarding learning strategy. I think it's just important not to overwhelm the learner when getting started. So it's really important to think about tying together those formal and informal learning experiences with micro lessons sort of in between in a way that's meaningful and makes sense to the learner, and that it's easy to use over a spaced period of time. Laura, do you have any thoughts on microlearning? Any additional thoughts, I guess, on microlearning for onboarding?
Absolutely. I mean, most of the people that take our microlearning and our lessons are new employees, and within that, they do have to do a lot of our standard type of things for, HR and compliance and those types of things. And so we've actually started working on making those things shorter and, again, more bite-sized for them to go through, more interactive and that type of thing. So it's kind of, again, part of the overall learning strategy of how we're looking at this. And so some things we realized, again, by utilizing those questions, not everything can be put into small pieces of content. But the things that we've been able to, we've absolutely done that with even some of the traditional onboarding content.
Yeah, I think it's just important that it's just part of the, working it into your overall strategy. Okay, so I'm going through the questions. Earlier, you mentioned avoiding repurposing existing training into microlearning, the meatloaf idea. But if you reevaluated your strategy and wanted to supplement an existing topic, could you? And the whole question won't pop up, but I think that's the gist of it. So, yeah, if you reevaluated your strategy and you want to supplement, I think you can obviously definitely do that. It's really just picking out the one learning objective that you want to come across in any micro lesson and sticking to that, having it available for your learners. I think really the key part is there, just keeping it to one specific objective.
And Carrie, that's exactly what we did with our first go around with this. Was absolutely, we had to take existing content, and the idea there is not just to say I have an 80-page module, so I'm going to break it down into 8 10-page modules. And I think that's what a lot of people think and try to do is, when we say just chunking existing content, it doesn't mean you can't use some of the content that you've got. It's really, though, evaluating how you're going to use that content and what's the best, microlearning modality to be able to present that content. So the actual content, the words, the concepts, that type of thing doesn't always change so much, but it's the modality of how it's delivered, and that's what really changes. So for us, that was more complicated, like I said, than starting from scratch, but we were able to utilize some of that existing content, which ultimately helps save money and time in the long run as well.
Yeah, and I think that having those micro lessons be able to stand on their own, because sometimes if you take a larger piece of training and you chunk it up, they don't necessarily, you have to do some work in order to make those be able to stand on their own. So I think that's
exactly. I completely agree with that.
All right, so another question. April wants to know if all microlearning has to be hosted in a learning management system. And so I think that's a really great question. I think it goes back to the recipe card. I believe it's number 6 on the recipe card. is sort of figuring out how you're going to deploy it. Is tracking important to your organization? If so, then an LMS is probably the way that you want to go, because you can assign learning, track it, report on it, analyze the data. But using an LMS can make getting to the content, more cumbersome, I guess, for your learners. Or microlearning can also be hosted on a web server, shared drive. It can be sent out via text or email. So I think it's just really important to figure out with your team, what is best for your organization and for your learners. So really take some time, sort out the options, think about the pros and cons of each, think outside the box a little bit. It's okay to do something different than you've always done. I know it's sometimes terrifying to think of people taking something you've created and you don't know that they've taken it. But I think as we look more toward microlearning, it's really about giving learners access to the materials and trusting they're going to find it and use it in the proper way to improve their performance. Laura, do you have anything that you want to share about that? And then there is a question, Laura, for you on the platform that you're using.
Okay. Yeah, I think, Carrie, your answer was spot on. I think a lot of times we think of LMS, but in reality, there are a lot of vendors out there that have different platforms available that they can put content into. So it's a matter of just doing some research and finding out who those organizations are and what they can do. And there are also standalone type things, like having questions pushed out to an app on the phone and things like that can be a part of the overall strategy, but that's really the micro-learning piece and the follow-up piece. And so if LMS is the way that your organization has to deliver content, you can do that. You can still do it in standalone, single objective, bite-sized pieces, and still track it and that type of thing. But, we really got away from those long 50-page click-through type modules again. And it is part of that overall strategy. So they can stand alone, but they kind of also fit together. And then, Carrie, you said there was another question as far as the platform that we're utilizing. So we actually have our own platform within Amgen that was developed by our programmers here. And then we also have another platform that we had a vendor develop for us. So we're utilizing multiple technologies. We've got we've got our LMS, we have an online platform, and then we have a couple of different platforms that are simply in the iPad as apps that we're utilizing as well. So I think that's what I mean by there are lots of different solutions that you can find, and it's really a matter of what works for your organization and what does your technology look like, what does your budget look like, those types of things.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. There's another question from Jane. What kind of assessments go well with microlearning? So I think something that I'm really into is doing scenarios, putting people in scenarios and having them, you can do like a mini scenario and having them make choices and give them feedback, and that is their assessment. Laura, do you guys have anything that you're doing right now in terms of assessments that correspond with microlearning, or are the assessments done at the end of a larger learning component?
No, we absolutely have assessments within our platform, so they have to answer questions, quick questions, and like little turnover flashcards like what you demonstrated earlier, Carrie, that they have to do within each of the quick modules to be able to move forward to the next section. And so we've got that, and then after the training, we do push questions out to their phone. And so those are quick questions. It's like 2 questions they answer, and if they get it right, then it moves to another set of questions. If they miss one, then they'll see that same question pop up later on in the week. And so they're getting a series of questions after they finish the learning as well, which I think has also really helped with that retention piece for the learner.
That's great. And then I think it's also important to talk about going back to our guiding principle of one key learning objective is really writing questions that will help you get to the root of, do your learners know this information or not? And so I don't subscribe to the idea of just asking questions for question's sake. And so I think it's really important just to go back to that principle and think, is this question going to let me know if this learner knows the information or not? And then I love the idea, Laura, of if they get it wrong, giving them additional resources, you know, and adapting in that way.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, Carrie, you bring up a really good point. That's been something that's really important for us too, that those questions really are reinforcing the key concepts that we're trying to get across within that objective. I think in the past, you know, we've all had the experience where we just write questions based on the content, and sometimes they're things that someone would never use, right? So we've really, really tried to focus more on what is it that we want them to remember? What are those key concepts? And again, you know, like I said, it helps with the remembering, but I think it also has really helped with the application of the knowledge as well.
All right, we have another question here. Does microlearning always have to be digital? And so actually, no, it doesn't. I think that's just really what we think about nowadays. But microlearning can be something physical that you can actually touch. So it can be a poster or a flyer or a printed job aid. Actually, at a previous employer, we used to do something called 1-point lesson job aids. And that was like 12 years ago. And we would print these things and send them to the team. And they're basically just instructions for how to do one task, you know, getting rid of all the other unnecessary information. How do you do this one task with images, step by step? They're very simplistic, easy to understand, and people love them. So they don't have to be digital. You can also print out flashcards to use on break during a classroom training, or, you know, you can actually create game boards now that people can touch and interact with. So the possibilities are really endless, I think, when you think about microlearning. And so I think that's really what's exciting about it. Let's see. Laura, I think this question's for you. Since you're utilizing, this is from Jane, if you're utilizing multiple platforms, how do you track the training record for all of them? Do you have them all?
That is a fantastic question. So what we do, I mean, some of them are more for retention, like the questions and that type of thing that we ask. But anytime somebody does something on the iPad, we can track that because it's not within our LMS system. But we also have them go into LMS and sign off that they've completed that module or that training. And so there is an extra step for us and for the representatives for tracking, but we've made that process super simple. They just go in and pull up, you know, the course code that we give them in LMS. They sign off and do an attestation that they've read and done the training. So we have record of that as well, because I believe what your point is that that's kind of the holy grail of where you keep track of everything within LMS, and that's where we have our transcripts and you know, what anybody's gone through, whether it's their compliance modules or whatever it might be. And so LMS also for us triggers that person has completed all those things at the end of their training, which is actually tied to their incentive comp. So we have to make sure they go in and sign off. We are very stringent in that, and so that's how we do it. And that's a great question. We actually put that back on the learner versus training, trying to do that. I'm sure people think, well, Amgen must have 1 million trainers, but we really don't. And so we have to be efficient and keep everything kind of in one place to that point. So it's a great question.
Okay, great. All right, I think we are at the end of our time, and I know Tim had I think a wrap-up slide that he wanted to go through. So thank you all so much for joining us for this webinar. I hope you had fun. It might have made you a little bit hungry, so sorry about that. It might be lunchtime for everybody now, but thank you for joining us.
Well, Carrie, thank you very much. Great presentation. Everybody, I'm going to change the screen if you bear with us for 1 second here. Great. Let me also point out we've got contact information showing here for Laura, Carrie, and Chris as well. I'm going to move on from this slide, but if anybody would like to reach out to any of the three of these, I can always get you connected as well, and I'll show my address here in a moment. I just wanted to end, as we close out today, I wanted to end it with a couple of invitations. First of all, if you happen to be in the Baltimore area next week, the 6th Annual Medical Device and Diagnostic Trainer Summit will be taking place October 18th and 19th at the Four Seasons, Baltimore. Would love to have you join us. Certainly not too late to register. There's more information at mddtrainersummit.com. And also, just looking ahead for next year, we would love to have you attend the 2018 L10 Annual Conference. We had a record-breaking year last year, and we hope to see the same and more people there in Phoenix next year. We'll be getting together June 11th to 14th, 2018 at the JW Marriott in Phoenix Desert Ridge in Phoenix, Arizona. You can find out more information about that at l10conference.com/Arizona. Also wanted to show you just quickly the L10 caliber events still coming up for the remainder of the year. We've got the MDD Summit we just mentioned, our network after work mixer taking place in Cambridge, Mass. On December 5th. Hope you can join us for that. And then some primetime classes of the core class and the master's class taking place in early December in Cambridge as well. You can always find out more information about upcoming L10 events at the l-10.org website. And finally, I'm going to end with inviting you all to join us again next Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday, October 18th, talking about Vision to Victory, how Leo Pharmaceuticals is driving field development and engagement. You can register or find more information about that webinar at l-10.org/webinars. For those who are wondering about today's recording, again, we're going to send you a follow-up email in about 1 hour from now. It'll also be posted in just a short while, a little sooner than that, to l-10.org/webinars on demand. So certainly if there's anything you want to check back with on that recording or share with any colleagues, you're more than welcome to do that. And finally, my information is showing here at the bottom of the screen. If I can help you with anything, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. And again, I'm going to end, Carol just sent in a nice note saying this was excellent. Thanks for taking the time to prepare and deliver this webinar. And I will echo Carol's comments. Let me end, in fact, with thanking our speakers today, Laura Last, Carrie Garrett, and Chris Webb, and our sponsors, CMR Institute. And most of all, I'm going to thank all of you in the audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. In the meantime, I'm going to wish you a good rest of your week, a good rest of your day, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye, everybody.